Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Future History Project. This is part 2 of week 16. It's still catch-up week. Part 1 was for Nemesis, a novel that was written in published in 1989 by Isaac Asimov. And part 2 is a novelette, or long short story, that was published in Astounding Science Fiction May 1949, and it was called Mother Earth, and it was reprinted in the early Asimov in 1972. What a fabulous cover, isn't that? Ears. I'm not sure if those are Isaac Asimov's ears. Oh, it's like, have you ever seen a more dreadful cover? This has to be in the top 10 of dreadful covers, and even the back is dreadful as well. Anyway, the story is quite interesting. It's there's no real date to it, but it's clearly it's after sort of the bicentennial man, and quite a bit after Nemesis, because those are sort of 22nd and 23rd centuries. This could and it's somewhere between Nemesis, quite a ways after actually, possibly closer or part way between that and the Caves of Steel, which is several thousand years into the future. Now, we've got an Earth, again, like in Nemesis, that is overcrowded. And Isaac Asimov put for 1949 that Earth was straining its resources with 6 billion people. Well, we've kind of surpassed that now, haven't we? Anyway, it's an Earth that is dying in some ways. But there are outer worlds, they call them, and in Caves of Steel and other places, they're going to be called spacers. And in Mother Earth, there are 50 worlds that have been colonized by humans. First of all, sort of as colonies, and then autonomous regions, and then separate countries. So they went that route in this story. And a lot of the action, or part of the action, is on Aurora, which will come up again in the other robot novels coming up. Now, Aurora was the first planet to be colonized, and so it's been centuries. So there is no sort of living human on Aurora that was born on Earth. Or descendants. They're very strict immigration and migration policies for these outer worlds. They are very concerned with purity of race, and that goes to, even like it says in the story, silly things of eye color and hair color, skin color, not just genetically. They have tried to sort of weed out any genetic deficiencies within humans, and they have imported Earth soil, Earth bacteria, and that to the planet so they can maintain this balance of being connected still to Earth, even though they feel that Earth people are subhuman now, because the population is running wild. They do not use birth control of any sort, or even just saying don't have babies. They don't use robots. Robots they don't appear in the story, but they are there. The outer worlds, their economy is based, all the workers are based on robots. And that coincides with previous stories where robots, in the robot short stories, robots have been outlawed on Earth. and only in space. And then this is sort of, there's a connection throughout there. So as I say, the space, or well, the outer worlds look down upon Earth. They won't allow Earth to, immigration there, and Earth is struggling, and they want to, you know, have an atomic power technology, use robots for hydroponics, but it's Earth customs, and I'm saying that it has to be real food, and there's still the prejudice against robots and any kind of birth control to sort of control the population is looked badly upon by Earth Terrans, Earth people. And the story is a bit fractious. There's scenes in various places. It starts out with a historian saying, looking back and saying there is a crisis here, and there's going to be a war. And he's looking back at the instances that have generated this, where between a war between Earth and the outer worlds. And he looks back at one of the key things is that the outer worlds are using robots freely and openly. And then it switches to sort of the politics that are going on, and there is distrust also from Earth towards the outer worlds, but also the outer worlds. Like there's one politician that is possibly, well, quite sympathetic to humans or Earth Terrans, not humans, but Terrans specifically, and he gets ousted. And it also sort of, and that's on Aurora, and also the Earth ambassador gets ousted because they figure he's sort of in line with this, and there's a conspiracy going on, and so they start pushing Earth out, and the outer worlds population do come to Earth as tourists, but they are sealed within cars. They don't go out and breathe the air. They don't touch other Terrans, but they will eat the food. They want tobacco. They smoke still. That's an interesting holdover from the when the story was written, actually. But anyway, it's so there's a discrepancy there. If they're so concerned about their health and the bacteria, but they still eat the food because they like the taste, and they're noticing that taste of things. They, like the one character says, you can't make bread taste the way it was, or the milk. So they import, like this rich person imports hay for the cows to produce good milk. And all this is sort of subtly, it's all sort of sprinkled throughout the story. And then it gets to a point where, as I say, the Earth ambassador is ousted from Aurora, and a war starts, basically. And the outer worlds win very quickly. Aurora, they squash it. Like it's called something like 7 Weeks War. And the stipulation of the treaty, like Earth surrenders. Stipulation of the treaty is that the outer worlds are going to isolate Earth, the Earth system, the solar system, and they will not be allowed out. There will be no communication, no like they can't do anything. They'll be isolated on Earth, and they say that it's up to them to solve their own problems. We don't want anything from Earth. It's a dead planet almost to us. There's no resources we want. The people we don't want for labor because they've got robots. So now Earth is isolated. Now, throughout this story, we hear about something called the Pacific Project, and we find out what this is, and it's a threefold thing. It was a system, or well, a plan. I guess it's a far-reaching, far-thinking plan for Earth, and one is to sort of not negotiate, but instigate a war that the outer worlds start and Earth surrenders. So they get isolated. They want to be isolated because the outer worlds think that they're superior. However, they're still clinging to Earth in the sense of they want everything, like they're weeding out any genetic differences, like that are normal differences that would be on Earth, but also differences that are subtly coming into the genomes from the planets, because regardless of how much soil they bring, bacteria they bring to these worlds, the natural bacteria in the natural world there encroaches, and it's making changes. So that's partially why this specific project is done. And they earth earth realizes this, and they know that the outer worlds are blind to this. They want to cling, they want pure humanity, a purity to this, but it's never going to happen because there'll be so many changes that will start happening because they can't stop it. The changes will happen and it will wipe them out basically. That's at least the thought from the specific project. So the 1/3 of it was to create a war. The second one is the thirst for revenge, to do something. Now they're stuck within the planet, the solar system, and they're gonna have to do something. They're gonna have to go to hydroponics, have to have birth control in order. Otherwise, the human race on Earth will die. So they'll be forced to do these things. They have to do it, and it's the only way that the ones that thought of this plan can see that Earth people, Terrans, will accept this because they have to survive. Just to tell them this, they won't accept it. But they'll see that they have to do this. They have to make these changes in order to survive. And then the next step is like the character says that it could be centuries or millennia in the future, where the outer worlds are sort of in decline. So then Earth knows, humans know that in order to survive out in the galaxy, they've got to adapt to the planets. So every human colony there will eventually change and become a unique sort of human species or race, in a sense, unique to that planet, and it'll be all over all the planets. This will happen. That's the story with this. And so they're just biding their time, and they figure it will happen. At least that's the plan. And like the character says, well, how do you know this is going to happen? Because other things, crop up, and other things could stop this from happening. And he says, yes, but you need to make a start, in a sense, for this. So I found it a very interesting story. By itself, taking this story out and reading it by itself is interesting. Like, those ideas that are interesting, and I could see that being an interesting story. However, when you connect it to the previous stories and the robot novels, The Empire and The Foundation, it takes on a different tone, because it does feel like it really is part of it. Like there are differences, and even Asimov in his, like, he does mention his writing of it in a little paragraph after the story, and he says that, you know, there's some shoddy writing there because he's got three characters. Like, he's got one that's like a Murnau, and then a Murno character, and then a Maynard. And he goes, like, how did he not see that? How did John W. Campbell not see that and make him change it? And he says it's confusing. And it is. Like, I'm reading going and going, wait a minute. So I have to go back and check. So there are faults to it. And also it's choppy. It's very choppy. But it's the ideas, again, looking at the ideas and seeing where they came from. And because Aurora is mentioned in here, and week 17, which was last week, or was it the week before? Anyway, is the Caves of Steel. And one of the characters comes from Aurora, our Daniel Oliva. Yeah, I'm pretty sure and they still call it, like, they're called Outer Worlds. So he is setting these things again within the sort of common universe that he has started for shortcuts. So he doesn't need to. So if people are aware of these other things, they could see things a little more deeper into the stories and make the connections or remember connections. Rather than creating a whole new world building and you know, history, you know, by itself. Like, it's not necessary to understand the ideas that he's putting across in the story, but it makes it a deeper understanding, I think, to at least to me it does. So I found it kind of interesting, other than, like I say, it's a bit it's fractious, it's choppy writing, and there are some, you know, like, again, he's not the greatest at dialogue at times in his early stories, and the characters are wooden partially, quite a bit, and they do seem very much alike. There's not a huge differentiation between characters yet. He is yet to get to that point in his writing ability. And I don't, it's typical of his early stuff. There's no women whatsoever, and I don't think there's one woman even mentioned by name in the story. But again, it's the other things that make it interesting. And I remember reading the story as I was going through. I read it many years ago, but it never really clicked to me that it was part of the future history, because I think I read it probably at the time that I may have been reading Foundation originally. So, and then by the time I got around to reading Caves of Steel, I had sort of forgotten most of it, so I didn't really realize that there was any connections to it. So the other couple times that I've read through, like the robot novels, Caves of Steel, and so forth, I never read this story. So this I'm rereading this with new eyes, in other words. So, excuse me. But yeah, so next week, well, I'll be starting this week, is the Caves of Steel. This is week 17. And this is a lovely Harper Voyager editions of these. At least the covers are. The paper is very poor. They're poorly made, but the covers are wonderful. This was originally published in the 50s, 1954. So it was after. This was the story in this one was 1949. So yeah. So if for those who have read this, what did they think of it? As you know, after, especially if you've read the Positronic Man, or the Bicentennial Man, and Nemesis, and then this one. Do you agree that there are connections there? And as I say, and even if you don't see too many connections yet, keep this story in mind as you read forward now. And even Nemesis. You see this thing. There's some differences with Nemesis. In here, it seems that the outer worlds. They moved. There's no mention that they were in settlements in space stations. And in here, they moved out as colonies of Earth immediately. In Nemesis, they are autonomous units. The settlements are autonomous immediately. They go out. They're autonomous. They are not dependent, or at least that's how I understood it. They're not dependent. They're not a colony, a settlement of Earth. They are autonomous. They are sort of, okay, now we're seceding in a sense, and we're going our own way. And in Mother Earth, he's more based it on sort of like the New World, the colonies, 13 colonies, and then they secede. They get their own government, and then they secede, and they create their own country. So that's how the process is in here. So again, there are differences, but it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see when I reread this if I can see any more sort of connections there. And as I read on or as we read on, but if I see any connections and anybody else see connections, I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, that's it for week 16, part 2. Take care, Book 2.